think I might need to get a haircut soon. Hello, Jacksonites. And oh boy, we have a very special episode today. Today, me and good old Trevor boy.
Yes, indeed. Howdy, everybody.
We'll be discussing the 1986 sci-fi epic horror action masterpiece that is James Cameron's Aliens. And oh boy, guys, strap yourselves in. We're about to go on a ride.
Yes, indeed, as James Cameron intended.
Yep. Trev.
All right, so I've kind of already briefly mentioned my history with the first two Alien movies. Aliens was one that made an impression on me when I was a kid in a scary fashion. The scenes that I remember are, of course, Ripley's nightmare at the start of the movie, harkening back to the chest burster. I had no idea what was going on whenever I was a kid. For some reason, I think the red coloring that you kind of see inside the APC whenever they're trying to get away, and I think it was a particular moment where Ripley's driving them out of there and the Xenomorph comes to the window. I remember that image from whenever I was a kid, the chest burster in the nest coming out of that one lady that was all strung up, or not strung up, but slimed. Cocooned, yes. I remember that. Also, what I found disturbing, again, because I just didn't know what was going on, was whenever Bishop gets stabbed by the Xenomorph Queen, and instead of blood, all this white stuff comes out. And now that I just said that, it sounds a little bit perverted, but it looked like milk is what was coming out. And I was like, I actually remember asking my dad, why is he doing that? And he told me that, he was a robot. And I was like, oh, okay, so he's not a real person. So yeah, anyway, those little impressions of a nightmarish fashion aside, eventually, I think it was, again, I think I said this in the AVP review, around the time when Alien vs. Predator came out, I was finally like, okay, I want to actually sit down and watch these movies in one sitting in full and not just have these kind of brief
bits and pieces.
Flashbacks. Yeah, kind of basically impressions. Yeah, bits and pieces of them. And so that's what I did. And Alien and Aliens became quite a frequent rewatch because, my dad likes those two. He's not a fan of Alien 3, so I had to, watch that one by myself at the time. But yeah, that and the first Predator, the first two Aliens, and then the first Predator. Lots of watches over the years. They were all bought tapes too. Me and Nick were talking about off camera how tapes used to be like in the $80 or $90 range in order to buy them back in the late 80s and early 90s. Yeah, and I'm sure whenever Dad got those three tapes, they cost a pretty penny. But yeah, anyway, I've also brought up the fact that whenever Alien vs. Predator came out, we did get it on DVD, but there was also a pay-per-view showing, which was a double feature of Aliens and AVP. So we watched that. And also, this was another one of those tapes that whenever I moved, or whenever the family moved, or we were in the process of moving, this was something that was brought along to watch whenever we were in transition. So this has been kind of a staple for years and years, at least in terms of something that I've actually watched and not just had hazy memories of from being a kid. I've watched it at least since 2004 fairly frequently. And yeah, it's an undeniable classic. Lots and lots of memories associated with it. It's a damn good time, as we're going to elaborate on. And I also, of course, have it on DVD as well as the other three of the quadrilogy from the 2003 release, which I'm going to have to show that off sometime in a video. So I guess there's motivation for getting back to YouTube.
Yeah, you frickin' turd muffin.
Well, Alien Day is coming up soon, but I don't want to make any promises that I can't deliver on. So, but the thought is there. So yeah, I mean, there's just so much to say about a movie like this, even if it seems like it's been a short span of time since I've saw it in full and seen it multiple times since then. I did mention to Nick that there was a time where I was a little bit, I was kind of leaning more towards the first movie, because I had that thing where I didn't like whenever a certain entry in a franchise was talked about so much that it was at the expense of the others, which have their good qualities as well.
Mm-hmm.
But this was never as bad a case as Terminator 2 for me, because I'd say there's a similar vibe in the fan bases in terms of how the first two Alien movies are praised, as well as the first two Terminators. But it never seemed as bad in the Alien fan base as it did with Terminator.
Yeah, that's true.
So, yeah, I never stayed on that soapbox too long. So, yeah, that's my history in a nutshell.
Well, I'm just going to show my hand right here and right now. I do think Aliens is superior to Alien. I do think that is a definitive fact as far as I'm concerned. I have a very, very long history with Aliens.
Go right into it.
This was one of the very first R-rated movies that I ever owned. Like, definitively owned. I had it on VHS for such a long, long time. And I've rewatched this movie so many times it's not even funny, to the point where I drove my mom absolutely insane with how many times I rewatched this movie. This is another one of those movies that I would rewatch constantly as a kid and drive her crazy with how many times I rewatch it. This is actually probably tied with The Scorpion King, Sleeping Beauty, believe it or not, and Small Soldiers as this, and the original Doom movie as just one of those movies I rewatched so many times. My mom eventually took it and hid it from me.
Side note, I love Small Soldiers. So,
as do I. Now, I'm not entirely sure when I watched this movie for the very first time. I have very kind of choppy memories of my mom had just came back into my life a year or so previous, and she had this little small apartment that was technically a 2-bedroom, but it was just kind of, it had a big living room, but just in general it was kind of small. And my Uncle Randy decided that he wanted to be generous. I think it was because he got all these movies on DVD. He gave me VHS copies of the 1999 Mummy movie, the first two Terminator movies, as well as Aliens. Now, I had seen Aliens beforehand, but this was the first time I had ever actually owned it. And I actually remember the movie scared me so badly, I didn't finish it. I turned it off after the first time the aliens are trying to get into the compound, and they had just been defeated by the robot guns for the very first time. And I remember hearing
the special edition. Sorry.
Huh?
So you've always seen the special edition version.
Yes, that is correct. We are discussing the 1990 special edition of Aliens, which is 2 hours and 37 minutes long, 20 minutes longer than the theatrical cut. This is really the only version of the movie that I have watched. So I've been very lucky in that sense, because I remember I actually rented Aliens from Blockbuster on DVD one time, and I tried to watch the theatrical cut. I immediately noticed a difference, and I just shut it off. I didn't even make it the first 10 minutes in. But anyway, I remember hearing, when I was a kid, the sound of the aliens pounding on the pressure door. That freaked me out so bad, I just turned it off and put in Terminator. But it wasn't until actually the day that I met my stepdad where we finally sat down and watched Aliens in full. I had my mom and also my stepdad there to kind of get me through the movie, and I wasn't really scared of it at all. I was just like really just digging the shit out of it. And it was at that moment I was a changed kid. I became obsessed with this movie. I like I said, I rewatched it so many times throughout my childhood. Like I think at one point in time I considered Aliens to be my number one favorite film of all time. That's how much this movie influenced me.
It's not a bad.
Of course, now it's changed, but it's another James Cameron movie now. So, yeah, James Cameron, he knows how to make good movies.
Hey, let me just say about something you brought up. Those tapes that you talked about, like The Mummy and then the first two Terminators, and that's quite a group of movies you got there. I would say those are pretty inspiring for if those are some early movies that you see.
Mm-hmm.
Those are some damn. Oh, and also you talking reminded me. I should also point out the tape that Dad had was, of course, the theatrical version. But he did see the special edition at some point later on. I don't know when. I think we did record it onto a DVD-R sometime back whenever we did that fairly briefly. So there's actually at least 2 or 3 copies of the movie in our household. But anyway, go on, Nick.
And just over the years, the movie really hasn't changed in my liking. Well, it's not, obviously not one of. It is one of my favorite films of all time. I'd easily put it in like my top 20. I just absolutely adore this movie. This is just one of those. This is one of those special movies for me, which may show my bias towards it, but I really don't care. If there's something that I'm passionate about and there's something that I really like, who's to say that it's a crime for me to gush over it? And if you try to, go sit in your angry masturbation corner because nobody wants to hear your shitty opinions. Aliens is a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. It's one of the best movies ever made. Certainly one of the greatest sequels ever made. Now, like, you hear people talk about the greatest sequels of all time. Terminator 2 is always brought up, of course, but Aliens very much often is also brought up in the lists of the greatest sequels ever made. It's also one of the greatest monster movies ever made, of course. One of the best sci-fi movies, one of James Cameron's best films. It's just a fucking amazingly spectacular and awesome film.
Well, more to your point, the specific thing that's said about this and T2, both James Cameron movies, is that they're sequels that surpass their originals.
I will be one of those people that says, yes, Aliens does surpass its predecessor in every which way, shape, and form. Me saying that, of course...
Right behind it.
Huh?
But the first one is still right behind it, though.
Well, I don't know. There's also Alien 3.
Yeah, but if we say that, it's going to be quite controversial, but more on that.
Well, I like being controversial, so...
That's right. Nothing wrong with that. You were saying?
Not to say that the first movie is bad, of course. Just watch our previous review. Alien is a great film. But Aliens is just, again, one of those times where somebody takes the template that is the first movie and puts it his own spin on it, expands upon it, lengthens it, and just makes it 10 times bigger.
Alien is the seed, and Aliens is the flower.
Aliens is the California redwood tree.
Yes. I concur.
Anything else to add before we get into the plot?
No, let's get into it, and then I'll just add any little thoughts about the plot afterwards.
Disclaimer, we are not going to talk about the production, at least not in depth. If there's something that we want to add when we're talking about a pro, then by all means we'll do that, but we're not going to have a section that's exclusive to the production, because that's a documentary in and of itself.
Yeah, there's a lot there to go over, as I found out today before we did this.
So, we're not really going to go too deep into that. We're just going to talk about the movie and the stuff that we like about the movie. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Excuse me.
See, he's starting to catch on. Anyway, let's get into the plot of Aliens. Ellen Ripley, once again played by Sigourney Weaver, has been in stasis for 57 years in an escape shuttle after destroying her ship, the Nostromo, to escape a lethal alien creature which slaughtered her crew. She is rescued and debriefed by her employers at the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, who are skeptical about her claim of alien eggs in a derelict ship on the exomoon LV-426. Since it is now the site of a terraforming colony known as Hadley's Hope. After contact is lost with the colony, Weyland-Yutani representative Carter Burke, played by Paul Reiser.
Paul Reiser, there we go.
Where am I? Oh, and Colonial Marine Lieutenant Gorman, played by
William Hope, I do believe.
Yes, William Bill Hope. They ask Ripley to accompany them as an advisor to investigate the situation. Still traumatized from her alien encounter, a seed which is also planted to explore in Terminator 2, she agrees on the condition that they exterminate the species. Honestly, one of my favorite films, the entire scene. Just tell me one thing, Burke. You're going out there to destroy them, right? Not to study, not to bring back, but to wipe them out. That's the plan. You have my word on it. All right, I'm in.
So one of your favorite films in the scene, huh? I'm sorry.
Favorite scenes in the film. Excuse me. Smart ass. But that's all that it really needs to say. It's just she's ready to face her demons and doesn't need to be committed to a psychiatric ward, unlike Sarah Connor.
Well, hold on. We'll elaborate on that with the cast. But yeah, I have something to say about that little moment. But continue.
Ripley is introduced to the Colonial Marines and an android named Bishop, played by a very young Lance Henriksen. Jeez. Which I want to say this too. Technically, Lance Henriksen is also the only other actor aside from Bill Paxton to be killed by a Terminator, Xenomorph, and a Yautja. Of course, on the spaceship, the Sulaco.
Fun fact.
A dropship delivers the expedition to the surface of LV-426. That fucker never uses all those weapons.
No.
Where they find the colony deserted. Makeshift barricades and battle signs are inside, but no bodies. 2 live alien facehuggers in containment tanks and a traumatized young girl nicknamed Newt are the sole survivors. An excellent case of environmental storytelling. The crew finds the colonists beneath the fusion-powered atmosphere processing station and head to their location, descending into corridors covered with alien secretions known as the Hive. At the center of the station, the Marines find the cocoon colonists serving as incubators for the creature's offspring. The Marines kill an infant alien after it bursts from a colonist's chest, rousing multiple adult aliens who ambush the Marines and kill or capture many of them. When the inexperienced Gorman panics, Ripley assumes command, takes control of their armored personnel carrier, or APC, and rams into the Hive to rescue Corporal Hicks, played by Michael Biehn, Private Hudson, played by Bill Paxton, and Private Vasquez, played by Jeanette Goldstein. Hicks orders the dropship to recover the survivors, but a stowaway alien kills the pilots and it crashes into the station. The survivors barricade themselves inside the colony after this. Ripley discovers Burke ordered the colonists to investigate the derelict spaceship containing the alien eggs, intending to profit by recovering them for biological weapon research. Why do people think capturing giant monsters will always get them money? Before she could expose him, Bishop informs the group the dropship crash damaged the power plant cooling system and it will soon explode, destroying the colony in a blast equivalent to about 40 megatons. And to quote Bishop later, in 19 minutes, this area is going to be a cloud of vapor the size of Nebraska. He volunteers to reach the colony transmitter and remotely pilot the Sulaco's remaining dropship to the surface. After falling asleep in the medical laboratory, Ripley and Newt awaken to find themselves trapped with the 2 released facehuggers. Ripley triggers a fire alarm to alert the Marines, who rescue them and kill the creatures. She accuses Burke of releasing the facehuggers to impregnate her and Newt, allowing him to smuggle the embryos through Earth's quarantine. The power is suddenly cut, and aliens attack through the ceiling. In the ensuing firefight, the aliens kill Burke, subdue Hudson, and injure Hicks. Gorman and Vasquez sacrifice themselves to stall the horde. Newt is separated from Ripley and captured. Ripley and Hicks reach Bishop in the second dropship, but she refuses to abandon Newt. The group travels to the processing station, allowing a heavily armed Ripley to enter the Hive and rescue Newt. Escaping, in one of my favorite films in the scenes in the movie, actually, honestly, of all time, they encounter the alien queen in a scene with no sound whatsoever except the slimy giving birth sound effects and the harsh, loud hissing and panting of the queen alien. Escaping, they encounter the alien queen in her egg chamber, and at first it seems like she's allowing Ripley and Newt to leave, but then an egg begins to hatch, and Ripley uses her flamethrower to destroy the eggs and the queen's ovipositor. Pursued by the enraged queen, Ripley and Newt join Bishop and Hicks on the dropship and escape moments before the station explodes, consuming the colony in a nuclear blast. On the Sulaco, however, somehow, how the fuck does she get aboard? The group is ambushed by the Queen, who's stowed away in the dropship's landing gear. The Queen tears Bishop in half and advances on Newt, but Ripley fights the creature with an exosuit cargo loader and expels it through an airlock into space. Ripley, Newt, Hicks, and the critically damaged Bishop enter hypersleep for their return trip to Earth. thus ending the movie, and if you want, ends the whole series.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, and I'll go ahead and lead into that with my thoughts about the plot. With the first three Alien movies, sadly, it wasn't a trend from 4 on. You can, if you only like if you're a fan of Alien and you didn't like anything that came after it, that movie comes full circle and doesn't leave anything hanging. The same with this movie, Alien 3. Even though it's a bit of a downer for some people, it also closes all of its threads, pretty much. So yeah, that's the great thing about the first three Alien movies. This one especially. This one also has the happiest ending, really.
Yep.
And it kind of factors into. Well, I'll say that for one of the characters because there's a recent movie in a sister franchise that tried to do something that was present here and it didn't succeed. But again, I'll elaborate in a second. But no, that one moment that I wanted to say something about, whenever Ripley keeps on saying, or first she tries to warn the company about xenomorphs. Then Bert comes to her for assistance, and she denies, participating. But ultimately, the reason why she decides to do it is so that she can have closure, and so that she doesn't have to live with the fear that there's these creatures still somewhere out there in the far reaches of space that might eventually, God forbid, come to Earth and ruin everything.
Which in the comics, that did happen.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, this plot is great. I'm not going to say it's straightforward because it has a bunch of great it has a bunch of great little genre moments of that you love to see in creature features. The whole idea of holding up and having limited resources is always a great thing to put in a creature feature.
Which is so painful in this movie. Like, you really get the sense that, yeah, these guys are trying their best, but they don't have a lot to work with.
Well, and I also have a theory, and I could elaborate, not talking about Gorman, but I'm thinking that the company also, or maybe it was Burke, had some kind of part to play in making sure there was an inexperienced, lieutenant in charge of the Marines, because I think it does contribute to why they don't succeed. But then again, they also have massive egos going into there. They're basically set up to fail. With all their bravado and everything, they have no idea what they're walking into. And I think on some level, the audience realizes that they're just too confident and they're too sure that they're going to just come in there and everything's going to be okay. And of course, there wouldn't be a movie if it wasn't. So, yeah. What do you think, Nick?
This plot is absolutely spectacular. It is one of those sequels that does the sequel idea right. It builds and expands upon its predecessor and its mythology. It goes in what feels like a natural direction for the series to go. It adds a whole bunch of new stuff to the film's mythology, and it adds more to the monster. It shows more of the monster. It shows more of the monsters. And it just does anything that you can think of that a good sequel should do, this movie does. And then some.
Well, to your point, what better way to escalate the stakes and the tension in terms of following up Alien by adding some more of these buggers into it.
Yep. So if you thought all that shit that only one alien could do was bad, there's more, which is even worse. And it's funny to think that they only had 6 alien suits for this movie behind the scenes. But that's just James Cameron for you. He knows how to work with what he's got. And it's also just funny to think. It kind of sounds like you'd think this movie would have a gigantic, like 30 or $40 million budget in 1986 money. No, this movie only had an $18.5 million budget, which was by no means a small, or was like a small budget. But it's just surprising that this movie manages to achieve and accomplish so much with just under $20 million.
I would say that it should be like a example of how Hollywood should try and return to is the fact that you don't have to have like a super trillions of dollar budget in order to
make a good movie.
Effects movies.
Like how Marvel acts so much nowadays. Like just like, oh, big blockbusters have to have tons of special effects and big budgets and big casts. No, you just have to make a good movie. Sure, that can help.
Yeah.
But that's not a guarantee.
Yeah, quite frankly, what happens is if you limit the resources of your cast and crew, or mainly your crew, it allows them to be more innovative, and they will be tested more and more inspired or motivated to deliver a quality product if they don't think they can just blow all these resources the studio is providing them.
And again, it just goes to show James Cameron is probably the greatest director in the world in the sense that he knows how to make a small-ish budget work. Hell, look at the original Terminator movie. While that movie does show its budget in certain aspects, what it manages to convey and do with only a less than $7 million budget is astonishing, and especially for such a young director. He just had some natural talent. And let's talk about James Cameron for a moment. Say what you want about him. Man knows how to make a good movie.
He does, and unfortunately, a lot of his ego problems, that's really his main fault. His ego, unfortunately, does drive his creativity and his determination.
True, so but I think that's an issue half the time, because I do also think he's earned the right to have an ego. But sometimes his ego does get in the way of him not being a dick.
I mean, he's hardly the first director to have that problem. You know, directors who produce these quality and legendary filmographies, but then you find out that they're, you know, assholes behind the scenes, but still their creative output is undeniable.
Nor will he be the last, but he certainly is probably one of the most well-known. And again, this may show my bias, but yeah, I really do consider James Cameron to be either my number one favorite or my second favorite. It really is so debatable between either him or Steven Spielberg, because Steven Spielberg, he just seems like a very wholesome individual. Like, really the only movie I can think of that Spielberg has done that's considered bad was Lincoln, only just because it was boring as fuck.
That's what my mom said too. She's a big history buff.
Like, I don't have an issue with historical films, but can you at least try to make them entertaining?
Well, I haven't seen a whole lot of those, but Lincoln in particular is one that I heard was, not too particularly interesting.
It was just dull. Yeah. But yeah. I think Steven Spielberg and James Cameron, they have their niches of film genres that they do very well. Like with James Cameron, it's sci-fi. With Spielberg, even though he's done sci-fi and he does it well, he adds the more fantastical element to it.
Well, both these guys are dreamers, you can tell, but one is a bit more detail and logic oriented, while the other is just the pure feeling of whatever ideas he has.
And also, one is just a bit more of a pleasant individual.
Yeah, so in that way, I guess you could say they balance each other out in terms of that level of talent in Hollywood.
Yep.
So one can be an asshole, but the other is a pleasant, very thoughtful and considerate individual.
That being, of course, Steven Spielberg. I've never heard anyone talk trash about Steven Spielberg, ever.
And if they do, they're just trying to drum up drama.
Yep. So yeah, I don't think anyone else could have done a better job than James Cameron. Like, maybe Ridley Scott could have added something to this, but I really don't think you could have picked a better director to do this movie other than James Cameron, especially fresh off the success of the original Terminator movie, this being only 2 years after that. And also, this was supposed to be a Rambo movie as well.
Oh, it was? I thought he just wrote the script for Rambo 2. And then
no, that's what I mean.
That's one reason why. Yeah.
You know more about that than I do.
It's just mentioned, like, I'll go ahead and read it. It's up here, like, in the second paragraph of the Wikipedia page. Despite the success of Alien, its sequel took years to develop. It was delayed by lawsuits, the lack of enthusiasm from 20th Century Fox, and repeated changes in management. Based on his scripts for The Terminator and Rambo First Blood Part 2, Cameron was hired to write a story for Aliens in 1983. The project stalled again until new Fox executive Lawrence Gordon, who also produced The Predator later, and also I believe Gordon Silver, the ones who did Lethal Weapon, correct?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and just this final sentence: the project stalled again until Lawrence Gordon advocated a sequel. So what I told Nick in Messenger was that it seems like Alien and Predator were kind of fated, at least in terms of similar people behind the scenes.
Yep.
To come together. So that's quite interesting. One note about both Spielberg and Cameron is the fact that they were very obviously guys who grew up in the 50s and 60s.
Oh, yeah. Although another thing, too, Cameron definitely is the more edgier of the two. He's willing to go R-rated. I can't think of a single Spielberg movie that is R-rated.
Well, shit, now I want to go look for it. He has some very intense PG-13s, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, that's like the extent that he's willing to go is a hard PG-13. But Cameron is willing to make that extra step and go full R.
Yeah, well, I'll just say, like, so their influences from the kind of films they saw when they were kids, Cameron definitely favors anything that was a bit more... I don't think he's ever directly said that this was an influence, but people have pointed out that there is some them.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. This movie is very similar to them.
Mm-hmm.
Watch our Super Kaiju Binge episode of them to hear more about that.
Go watch our review.
Plug.
Yes, exactly. Plug, yeah. But Cameron, even... This is something he's mentioned over the years. Like, his favorite Harryhausen movie is Mysterious Island. And
really?
A character in that is Captain Nemo, who's an explorer of the oceans. So you can tell from a very early age that Cameron was fascinated by what was in the ocean. And, like a sense of adventure, or a scientist who explores and studies that kind of thing. Spielberg, by comparison, is more interested, I think, in the wonder. Well, I mean, there is an overlap in their sense of wonder, because I think The Abyss and Close Encounters of the Third Kind are basically great counterparts to each other.
Yeah.
In terms of friendly extraterrestrials, some come from the sky, some are already here deep in the oceans. But yeah, I think it's funny that we mentioned both of them, because while they, of course, are different individuals and have their different tastes, they do come from kind of the same background in terms of their influences. So, I mean, and you can see it throughout their filmography, especially their sci-fi and fantasy stuff.
It just makes me wonder, How would a Predator movie directed by James Cameron turn out?
Well, yeah, actually, you didn't mention this in your review. He was on a plane with Stan Winston. They were talking about stuff. And, Stan said, I'm working on this movie, and I'm coming up with designs. And James Cameron told him, I've always wanted to see something with mandibles.
Oh, okay.
And Stan Winston was like, oh, you're full of shit. But what he was secretly doing was adding mandibles to the design. So I think that's actually a story that Stan Winston told, is that that James Cameron actually had some influence in how the Predator finally ended up looking. Now, as for what he would do with the Predator, that is a very interesting question in itself. But considering that Predator and Aliens are, in my opinion, probably the ideal double bill, I think they probably would have been very similar. But,
in a good way.
It's a very intriguing question. What would he do to elaborate on the mythos of the Predator? So, yeah.
Probably take humans to the Predator homeworld.
Yeah.
And
then,
just get fucked the fuck up. That too. All right, so let us talk about our pros for Aliens.
We should say we don't have any cons. We might mention some nitpicks, but we don't really have anything to hold against the movie.
We'll get to that later.
Yes.
Pro number 1 is the cast. For both of us. Yes. Let's start with Ripley. Trev, go ahead.
Yes. So I mentioned yesterday that Ripley was basically Sigourney Weaver's first major role. So it makes sense that she would come back to it. I can't remember looking over if she maybe had some hesitation. She might have.
She turned down multiple offers, surprisingly, but until she got a $1 million paycheck and also James Cameron's involvement.
Mm-hmm.
Did she finally accept?
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of a no-brainer. Well, sometimes for actors, they don't realize that it's a no-brainer to come back to a role that's especially beloved, unfortunately. But I'm glad that she did, whatever the motivations were. Because I've actually brought this up before in our Terminator Dark Fate review. And I probably will again for Terminator 2. Compare Ripley and Sarah Connor. Both are very strong female characters who get shit done and are iconic. But I've always kind of leaned towards Ripley, mainly because she handles her trauma better.
Yes.
And I don't mean to dismiss anybody who, still struggles with trauma or anything like that, but it's just inspiring to see somebody go through the events that they did in the original Alien, for instance, and then it obviously still bothers them because she has nightmares here, and whenever she actually sees a chest burster again, she reacts accordingly.
She has massive PTSD in this film.
Yes, but what is distinct about Ripley in comparison to Sarah, who's almost consumed by her trauma, both in T2 and Dark Fate, Ripley just gets stronger. She hardens her resolve with each subsequent movie. She just realizes that she needs to survive, and in this case, really what's going on here is that there's something of not a comeuppance, but it's kind of like a natural. It's like nature righting itself, because as we find out in the extended version, and I don't know why it was cut out, in that time that Ripley was in space for 57 years, her daughter aged and then eventually died relatively young, surprisingly, at least I would think so, because she was I think in her mid or early 60s.
66.
Is 60, okay, mid 60s. So, I mean, yeah, people still do die at that age, but one would think that in a future where probably there had been advances in medicine, because I mean, even now, the survival rate for elderly people, is more often at least into the 80s, and sometimes the 90s and hundreds. So that always shocked me, and I guess made it a little bit more tragic.
Well, I think that's just because at the time, I think mid to late 60s was on the lower scale of old age, because this was 1986 after all, and a lot has advanced since 1986.
Yeah. That's true. But no, that's just something that always kind of stuck out to me. But anyway, the development for Ripley here, in which will also lead into another character in a second, is that she has to be strong in a way because she ends up being the surrogate mother to Newt. And that's also kind of like I was trying to get at, that nature rights itself in the fact that she gets a second chance.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly how I would put it too.
She gets a second chance by getting a surrogate daughter to make up for all that time that she lost with her own. And so that just feels like a great thing to add to Ripley, because she's not only a strong woman who handles herself in a situation without children, she also is, like, you could say, the epitome of motherhood, in the fact that when she is in a situation with a child, she is still nurturing, she's still feminine, she's still
motherly.
She comes across motherly, but she is still strong and really kind of the rock of this whole group, if you think about it. Which is funny, because she's only supposed to be an advisor, and yet she ends up being the one who takes charge, mainly because, again, like I mentioned earlier, they don't know what they're walking into here.
Nope.
And so to wrap, before I hand it over to you, Nick, I just wanted to mention, and again, I think I've probably heard this before, but I was reminded of it reading here on Wikipedia. Apparently, Sigourney Weaver's mother actually played Amanda as an older woman. So that's a neat little bit of trivia, because I thought they might have just aged Sigourney up, but apparently that was her mother. So that's cool.
Fun fact. Again, a callback to Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween. They do something similar to that, even though they weren't related. Well, no, they still weren't related. In Halloween H2O, the old gal that startles Laurie Strode halfway through H2O was Janet Leigh, her mom, driving the same psycho car as well.
Exactly. So there's some nice trivia for everybody, if you didn't know already.
So my thoughts on Ripley. Keeping in mind her performance in Alien is not bad, but in any and every which way, shape, and form, Sigourney Weaver is on the top of her game and is far superior in this movie than in Alien. This is a common thing, at least whenever James Cameron does a sequel, which I imagine they will be exploring. Neytiri having some kind of PTSD, witnessing the death of her father at the hands of humans in the first Avatar and Avatar 2. A lot of characters in James Cameron movies tend to have PTSD, especially if he does a sequel, though he's only done 2, at least that I know of. And yes, there are a lot of similarities between Ripley and Sarah. They're both clearly damaged. They're both clearly traumatized. And they both turn into extremely strong, independent female characters. But I do agree in some cases with Trev. Ripley is the better character because, yes, she has her moments where it's very obvious that she's damaged and scarred and psychologically permanently damaged. She internalizes her trauma and keeps herself together for the most part. She has her moments where her anger and frustration and also her fear take over her, like the briefing scene where she's like, and all this bullshit that you think is so important, you can just kiss all that goodbye. But she uses that fear. she uses that trauma and she uses that pain to drive herself forward and turn it into a weapon, against humans in some certain situations, but also especially to defeat the monsters that scared her and traumatized her so badly. It's kind of a bit of a play on Dr. Serizawa's quote, and I think it's either 2014 or King of the Monsters. The only way to make peace with your demons, or like the only way to defeat your demons, is to make peace with the monsters that created them. It's a bit different than that, but it's among certain lines. In order to get over your fear, you must fight the monsters that caused you fear, is Ripley's case.
I'm sorry not to cut you off. I'm glad you brought that up because Michael Dougherty very much wanted King of the Monsters to be the aliens to 2014's Alien. And in that regard,
he succeeds.
I think there's definitely lots of overlap. But yeah.
And I do believe, again, Sarah Connor comes close, but still Ripley does embody the perfect type of strong female character. Not being butch, not looking like a man, being very battle-hardened, very battle-minded, being very strong and not angry per se, but have a no-nonsense badass attitude. But still having that little feminine touch to make them look motherly. Which, leading into Newt, Ripley does fantastically. So what are your thoughts on Newt?
Well, I alluded to this whenever we were talking after the plot. I feel like the Predator really wanted to create a new Newt with Rory.
Failed.
Failed, yes, obviously. Newt also, well, I'll just say what she demonstrates, and this is probably another reason why Aliens is so popular. Yes, it's a R-rated, scary, violent monster movie, but Newt ends up being kind of a touchstone for a wider audience, because I wouldn't be surprised if some people probably took their kids to go see this back in the day, because I mean that would have contributed to its enormous box office. And there is something about Aliens that feels like it's not just a regular horror or monster movie. It feels like maybe not necessarily an event, but it also appeals to that and the fact that it's an event movie. But it also almost is kind of something that you can watch with the whole family if you're so inclined. It depends on what your tastes for what you want your kids to see or not see is. But I think Newt is kind of the embodiment of that. What helps in the massive appeal of this movie is whenever you put a kid in there, and especially one that's as lovable as Newt. Basically, what Cameron does is he basically takes the little girl from them and decides to keep her around for the whole movie.
Yep.
And she also, she doesn't talk for a good while. But then there's something that, Ripley says that, finally allows or makes her comfortable enough to speak. That's the thing, is that Ripley earns Newt's trust very quickly. So
I just think the whole group earns her trust very quickly, because I get the sense that she likes to be, well, specifically Ripley and Hicks and a little bit of Hudson and Bishop.
Well, yeah, because she mentions both of them by name later on. So, and also very, very smart, very resourceful little girl, very observant, very, basically she's a kid version of Ripley.
Yeah, which is something I was going to mention, not only like superficially, but also similar to Ripley. Obviously, Newt is very traumatized. in some ways, it's a bit worse for her, obviously, because A, she is a little girl, but also she seemingly watched her parents die. It's never stated in the movie, but you can definitely infer that, and I feel like that is strongly suggested.
Well, that's also a nice tidbit from the special edition. Again, I don't know why they cut it. For one thing, excuse you. there's some outstanding effect sequences in that little colony scene. It also it lets you know that Burke did indeed tell people there at the colony to go and send somebody out to investigate this certain point on the map, which is where the Juggernaut is from the original Alien.
Mm-hmm.
Nice matte painting. I'm kind of getting into the effects a little bit here, but it is a Newt related scene. We get to see her brother Timmy. We get to see her mom and dad, which they're apparently prospectors.
Pretty much, yeah.
And so that's a nice, great addition because we don't see everything that happened to the other three members of her family.
We just see enough to infer from context.
Yeah, we get to see the start of it. So again, let's just go ahead and bring our nitpick with her. Well, not so much me, but with you. Let's just go ahead and mention our nitpick. She does kind of scream
a little too much.
It's kind of the same tone and everything. So it's for me, it's kind of like Mary Jane's scream in the same Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, which they actually did reuse the audio for that at some point.
Yeah, multiple times.
Yeah. So
yeah, it's not. It's really something that if I let it bug me, it does. But if I just kind of like push it to the side and just like just to deal with it, it doesn't really bug me. But yeah, I think her scream is just a tad bit annoying. Mostly in the two scenes where she literally just stands there and screams, like the first time she does it when she sees her dad being face hugged. I think that's a little too long. And also when Ripley is trying to fight off the first face hugger, she's just standing there getting covered in water and just screaming. Like, really? You can't try to jump in and help, maybe? But then she has to try to fight off the second one, so at least that kills it. But again, it's just really only something that bugs me if I let it bug me. Going back to praising Newt, similar to Ripley too, she, at first is a bit more externally traumatized than Ripley. Like, she doesn't talk a lot. For first half of her screen time, she doesn't talk a whole lot. And when she does speak, she's very, very soft-spoken and almost kind of visually talkative, kind of. Like, Ripley asks, "Are you okay?" She just gives the thumbs up. Which I kind of feel like is a...
without speaking.
Huh?
She communicates without speaking.
Yeah, there you go. So. I feel like it was a slight bit of a sarcastic thumbs up, like, living the dream.
Yeah, sure, why not?
But as the movie goes on, and as she spends more time with these people, she starts to open up and be a bit more vocal. Like, mainly it's when she's helping the others try to escape the aliens and escape the compound. She's not so soft-spoken anymore. And she's very resourceful. Yeah, like she knows she would crawl around the air ducts to escape the aliens. And because of that, she spent a lot of time there, so she memorized the layout, which is helpful. And she is a damsel in distress because she's a little girl, but she's a helpful damsel in distress, which is a good one.
Yeah, so here's the thing. There's nothing wrong with the damsel in distress. There's a good and a bad way to do it. You just have to make sure you do the quote unquote right way, I guess you'd say. But anyway, continue.
And it also helps that Sigourney Weaver and Carrie Henn have fantastic chemistry.
Yes, very much so.
I don't know if Carrie Henn did any more movies after this. I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't, because there's no link for her on the Wikipedia page, at least that I know of.
In fact, there's a picture of her now, or more recent picture, and it does say that, this was her only movie role, and that was her choice. Yeah, Carrie Henn. The picture on Wikipedia is from 2008. Aliens is her only credited acting role since she decided not to pursue an acting career. She was on the commentary.
Oh, there she is.
The commentaries of the movie, and she did participate and talk about her experience with the movie and why she didn't want to do anymore. So there's that.
Huh. Well, go figure.
I want to bring up one little additional thing about Ripley, since Ripley and Newt mirror each other so much. One thing about how even when Ripley kind of loses control, I guess you'd say, of her composure, like whenever she's driving the APC out of the reactor area, Hicks has to basically tell her that it's okay, they're clear, but still her determination and her drive, motivated by her fear to get out of there, is what saved everybody.
Well, I also think not only that, but she was just like having an adrenaline rush and escaping, so she was kind of deaf to the world. She was like having major tunnel vision.
Exactly. But do you have anything else to say about Newt, Nick? Because I have one more thing to say.
I just, I want to say here, despite her sudden fame, Henn decided not to pursue acting so she could remain close to her family. She said some people resented her fame and was uncertain whether people liked her for being in the film or for herself. She went on to become a teacher. She does maintain a relationship with Sigourney Weaver and still has a framed picture of her and Weaver, which the actress had given her after filming was complete, which I think is sweet.
Yes, indeed. No, well, I think fine note to wrap. There's lots of other things we could say, but to put a wrap on the two characters and how they mirror each other, really they are, aside from the Queen, more on her in a little bit.
Oh boy!
They are pretty much the iconic image of this movie. They're on the poster, or one of the posters, where they're in the egg chamber surrounded by the eggs, and Ripley's holding Newt. She has the rifle with her. That image is also on I think that first VHS release also. Ripley and Newt are kind of the heart of this movie, and definitely one of the iconic images from it is them. No pun intended, based on stuff I brought up
already. Also, I do want to say, I'm sure something that helped was, she wasn't born at the time, but Sigourney Weaver actually does have a daughter. That she was born in 1990, so maybe this was like a massive period of preparing her for motherhood, which I also just learned she does have a long-time friendship with Jamie Lee Curtis. So I wonder if those two influenced each other over the years.
Oh, Sigourney Weaver and her?
Yeah.
Oh, that's neat. Well, they are both icon. Well, they kind of have, they serve, or not serve, they have been in similar genres and work in the same business. So, and with the same people, because Jamie Lee Curtis worked with Cameron in True Lies.
True Lies, that's right, yeah.
So, it happens. People get to know each other if they know the same people that they're working with. Or
she's also been
the same fan circuit.
She's been married to the same man since 1984. Good for her. Alrighty, so the next cast member we're going to talk about is Hicks, played, of course, by Michael Biehn. I'm just going to get this out of the way. This may be controversial. I like Michael Biehn better in this movie than in the original Terminator. Only because I feel like he has more to work with here. He's able to flex his acting muscles a lot more here.
Yeah, he's not running around screaming at everybody, basically saying, repent, repent. I mean, that's not what he's literally doing in Terminator, but more or less. Prepare for the oncoming AI assault.
And having cringy 1984 sex with a young Linda Hamilton.
Well, yeah, more on that for another time. But yeah, I mean, I think I like both. I mean, I just like Michael Biehn. I think he's actually kind of an underutilized actor.
Very, yes.
This was kind of, the 80s was kind of his time to shine. There was a little bit maybe in the 90s, but not too much. I think the main thing I remember him from the 90s was doing the cinematics from one of the Command and Conquer games with James Earl Jones. But yeah, he's an underutilized actor in my opinion. He did pop up on The Mandalorian recently, but I think that has to do with Favreau and Filoni and all them being fans of this particular era of cinema.
And he also voiced the main character in Far Cry Blood Dragon, which was a standalone spinoff of the Far Cry series. But yeah, I would agree. Michael Biehn's. Oh, he was also in Planet Terror.
Oh, that's right. Damn, I need to watch that again. I've been wanting to. But still, I mean, he's just. Apparently Robert Rodriguez likes him
because of Terminator.
It's just weird how sometimes people or actors only they're memorable, but only from like a certain period of time in film history, and then you're like, whatever happened to them? Pretty much, that's kind of what it is. I guess you could say he's maybe like a cult icon, or like
probably more along those lines. So I love Hicks. He's probably equally as good as Ripley in this film. And similar to Parker, Hicks is very much Ripley's male counterpart in this movie, where he seems pretty unassuming at first, and you don't really notice him at first, partially because like the rest of his team kind of takes center stage in being all loud and rowdy and rambunctious and egotistical. But then when shit hits the fan, he turns out to be the one who truly knows how to keep his head in the game, give some good one-liners throughout the film, and take charge of the situation and keep a cool head and do his best to make the situation work in their advantage. Again, like Ripley in the first movie. And it also helps.
More to your point, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it also does help that Michael Biehn and Sigourney Weaver have very good chemistry as well. There's a slight possible romantic interest there, but I think it's just more along the lines, like they're kind of flirty, but it's more just them trying to make a little bit of levity in their situation and just kind of poke fun at each other.
But also, like whenever they're in the dropship, he's giving her the eye. I mean, like he's like really sizing her up, and she kind of does the bashful look away thing, So there is, I guess, minor romantic tension going on there. But more to your point about him being unassuming, he almost kind of seems like the butt of everybody's jokes.
Somebody wake up, Hicks.
Whenever he when everybody wakes up, who said it?
Drake.
Oh crap, what was his
name?
Name?
Hicks, man, you look just like I feel.
Yeah, and gets him and Hudson mixed up.
Hudson, sir. He's Hicks.
So that's more of a Gorman problem. He falls asleep on the drop ship, which is funny because it's just like like the feel of being dropped. It's relaxing, and he falls asleep. Somebody wake up Hicks. That's funny. So he's kind of like a joke for a little bit, but then, like you said, he's the one who steps up and takes charge.
Yep. And one of my favorite scenes with Hicks, he doesn't have a single line of dialogue. It's when they have all, like they're having that meeting in the dropship area, and Ripley is recounting her experience from the first film. Everyone there is just kind of like half listening, but they're like, oh, let's just go through the motions. But then you see Hicks, he's sitting there and he's smoking a cigarette, but he is actually listening. And he is taking in the information that Ripley has, and he is taking this a bit seriously. He's not joking around. He's not half listening, just half like, oh, I'm just here for the money or some shit like that. He actually is taking an interest and taking this seriously. And it's just the look on his face. He's
if you think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You
finish, and then I'll go.
I'll just say, if you look at the expression on his face, he is actually sitting there, and he's being a professional soldier.
Well, and I'll just say, if you think about it, the two people, the two humans who make it out are the people who make a connection with Ripley. Hicks is the only one who's, like you said, he's really listening. He's taking her input seriously. He's also watching out for her. This is also from the extended edition, in case you didn't know. Right before they are given the all clear to walk in, she hesitates at the door for a second. And, he asks her if she's all right. And then it just seems like that little bit of consideration is what makes her stronger, I guess you'd say.
Bit like Lex from the first Alien vs. Predator.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't realize that until now, but yeah, it's a good point. But yeah, it just I like what you brought up, the fact that he's actually listening. Oh, he and Apone are impressed by how she handles herself whenever she just jumps in there and helps, helping to load things by taking control of the loader. Just fun little character moments are sprinkled throughout.
And I also like that he, too, not nearly as much as Ripley, it's understandable because he's busy trying to keep shit together, but he also cares for Newt as well a little bit. Like when she's about to reach for the grenade, he's just like, don't touch that. It's dangerous, honey. Let's see, what else?
He realizes that he might have been a bit too stern, but then he has that softness where he's like, I'm just doing it. I'm just saying that for your own good, pretty much.
Yeah. Let's see, what else? Oh, and he has a couple little funny scenes that all have to do with the props. So I'll just go and grab that real quick. When they have to not use their be-all, end-all, totally look like Terminator laser guns, they have to give up their guns, and then out of nowhere, Hicks just pulls out a shotgun, and it's just like, I like to keep this handy for close encounters. And then a few minutes later, as an alien's trying to break its way into the APC, picks up that same shotgun, shoves it in the alien's mouth, and just goes, "Eat this!" Blows out the back of the alien's head. Love it. So, yeah, Rix is fucking fantastic. Did I say Ricks? Hicks.
Yes.
Oh,
Wait,
why am I
is it
so
your
discombobulated?
favorite film in the scene?
That's gonna be the next meme of me. I swear to God.
My favorite film in this.
Fuck
Anyway,
you.
yes.
So yeah, that's all I have to say about Hicks. He's an awesome dude. He's probably Michael Bihn's best performance. And I'd say he's equally as good as Ripley. Love him.
Well, again, he's kind of a Cameron staple, at least for like his first three big movies. Kyle and Terminator, Hicks in this, and then I forgot what his rank is, but his name is Coffee in The Abyss, and he's the guy who suffers from like a pressure-related sickness and kind of goes AWOL on the crew in The Abyss. But I haven't seen The Abyss in whole.
With a terrible mustache.
Yeah, but yeah, he was a Cameron staple here for a little bit, kind of like Paxton. Although I think Paxton was there a bit longer in terms of the stuff popped it up. But anyway,
I feel like if Cameron was to try to make Avatar any sooner, Jake Sully would have hella been played by Michael Biehn.
Oh yeah, if he had made it like in the 80s, if he could have done it then, yeah, it definitely probably would have been him.
All right, so
he kind of came across as the leading man for the Cameron movie. Yeah, he pretty much is.
Up next is Hudson, played by Bill Paxton.
Yes, indeed. A bit more irritating than Jerry Lambert in Predator 2, but still endearing in his own way. He's kind of the comic relief of the movie. I mean, there's funny bits from everybody.
But he's consistently the comic relief. Though sometimes, yes, he does get a little annoying.
He's the Lambert of this movie. If you
yes.
think about it, but he's voicing what the audience is thinking. Well, should they be, I guess some audience members, but he's like, it's funny because he has all this bravado and everything whenever we're leading up to before we get to LV-246. And then when everything goes to pot,
his bubble had been not just burst, but fucking destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
That all those scenes where he's just being kind of a whiny bitch, for lack of a better term. Yes,
yeah.
They are kind of annoying, but thankfully Ripley steps in as the audience as well and says, shut the fuck up, pull your head out of your ass, and let's get to work and solve the problem. And he does.
Oh, of course, nicer. Yeah, he does. Well, that's the thing, is that Ripley kind of just commands your respect.
Yep.
Or she does once whoever's left realizes, oh crap, she was right.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, I think Hudson probably gets the most laughs out of me from the movie, but it's hard. It's hard not to. It's hard to dislike Bill Paxton, in my opinion, even if he gets a little irritating. It's understandable because some people in that situation would react the same way.
Just kind of freak the fuck out and be like, God, what the hell are we going to do? We literally just got our asses kicked. What the fuck?
He's also the closest thing to where some of his dialogue kind of evokes that dread that you imagine in a situation where you're just kind of picturing what he's fearing, saying this is what's going to happen and, we're fucked and, stuff like that.
And thankfully, all throughout the rest of the movie, after Ripley, for lack of a better term, puts him in his place, you can tell that he really is fighting to keep himself together and try to fix the situation. And he still kind of has that really nutty, fearful edge to him. But kind of like Ripley, too, you get the sense he's trying to use that as fuel for him to just keep going. And he certainly, in the end, does put up a fight, which is cool. Which makes you like, oh man, not Hudson when he finally dies.
Yeah, there is that for sure. It's not like a oh good riddance kind of death. It's kind of like just whenever he was coming around.
Yep.
But then again, there's only well, they don't bring that up in this one because in the first movie the shuttle only had room for 3, I think it was, not 4.
I think 3. Yeah.
It's not a problem with the Sulaco because they don't have to blow up their ship. But,
True.
They just have to get back to it somehow.
Next, we have.
Can I just read? Oh, can I real quick? And this is going back to Hicks for a minute.
Go ahead.
Stephen Lang, who's from Avatar, plays the villain in that. He actually auditioned for the role of Hicks.
Yeah, I just mentioned that. Or I mentioned, totally. I just found that myself, but I was going to let you bring it up.
Yeah, so he's kind of had an association with Cameron for a good while. Speaking of Avatar in the past, so to speak. But yeah, anyway, moving on.
All right, so the next character, Vasquez. Not much to talk about her, but she's gay.
I brought this up to Nick. Whenever she's asking about Ripley, who she calls Snow White, Pharaoh, gives her the information and everything. And then I noticed this thanks to the subtitles, which I, always put on now. It's thanks to Netflix. It also helps me catch things that I might miss. What she says in Spanish is "que bonita," which is, how beautiful. Which, that clued me in and was thinking, so she's checking Ripley out. Now, she does have a bit of she has a rapport, not a bit of, she definitely has a rapport with Drake.
Yep.
Who's definitely the other Marine that she's like the closest to, it seems like. She even has some jokes with Hudson, about, fucking basically. So it kind of implies that maybe she's bi. So I was telling Nick, it's also interesting that in some of our reviews, we kind of have this. Well, I wasn't with you in the Predator review, but I agree with you about Mac and Blaine, and also Copper in The Thing. It's funny the things that you notice in hindsight that were probably understated, or maybe they're nothing at all. Maybe it's just something that we project onto the movies now. But I think Vasquez, I'm gonna say her name without a Texan twang for a sec. She definitely, I think, is a more prime example of where, that's probably what's going on there. She's also played by, you have her name handy, Nick?
Jeanette Goldstein, who would later go on to play John Connor's foster mother in Terminator 2.
Yes, exactly. So again, Cameron keeps, this happens with a lot of directors, really. Cameron keeps people that he works well with, he keeps them around for other stuff.
They have regulars.
So, yeah.
Like Rob Zombie has his regulars and Frank Darabont has his regulars, just to name 2 examples.
Oh, yeah, among many. There's something I was going to mention about, well, I'm giving people a clue. There's apparently now a little bit of controversy about the fact that she's a white actress playing a Latina. And I don't think it's anything to make a big deal of, because for one thing, hey people, they're actors, and I actually was had it not been brought up, aside from the fact, I would have been totally convinced that she was, a Latina. So again, that's something that's popped up in recent years. Thankfully, it hasn't gained any steam. But it's just
let's just let it not. Because that's just making a mountain out of a molehill. Again, go sit in your angry masturbation corner and just shut the fuck up.
Exactly. So, yeah, she is memorable. I think, again, to connect it to Predator 2, I think, oh, crap. I forgot her name. In
Leona?
Predator 2.
Leona?
Lady. Yeah, there we go. Oh, man, was embarrassing. Yeah, I think that's definitely another example of. In fact, actually, Vasquez and Hudson have kind of a similar dynamic where she kind of busts his balls a little bit, kind of the same way that Leona busts Jerry's balls in Predator 2, literally in that case. It's just funny. Just to point, if it wasn't made obvious from our review, Predator 2 definitely makes some appreciated callbacks to Aliens, which helps their synergy. But yeah, she's a good character. She's one of the ones that lasts a good long while. She has a good little dynamic with Gorman where she hates his guts at first, but they end up dying together. So it's almost a little poetic. It's subtle, but yeah, she's really everybody. Even some of the expendable. There are some Marines here that are most definitely expendable.
Yeah.
Who we don't ever really get to know. But even the ones who hang around a little bit, everybody. It's a memorable crew in my opinion. And she's definitely one of the stronger highlights. That's probably why she hangs around as long as she does.
Yep. So my thoughts on Vasquez. She is the embodiment of just a female badass. Like she's a no nonsense, no bullshit, a guns ablazing, badass chick. She takes no shit from the dudes, and any dudes who do give her shit, she won't hesitate to try to fuck them up, like how she acts towards Gorman. Yeah, she has a good go get 'em, guns blazing attitude. And it's again kind of a shame that she dies. Though again, it's kind of poetic that she dies with the dude that she hates the most. Speaking of which,
Gorman.
Let's talk about Gorman. I never. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say he's also in another popular sequel. He's also in Hellraiser 2, although he's a bit more competent in that one.
Oh yeah, he is.
Yeah, but anyway, I don't know if he's British or not, because this movie was filmed over in Pinewood Studios, and Hellraiser was also the first two movies were British or partially British films, so I don't know if that was the case or not. But anyway, Gorman is very well, it's weird because he's not exactly super unlikable. We just kind of pity him, or at least I do. The fact that he just really is in over his head, but he tries to have a sense of authority that his confidence doesn't match. And even whenever he is literally knocked on his ass from being just being clueless, I guess you'd say, or just it's almost kind of funny. Not only does he not. Well, let's talk about that scene if you want. Where he's basically watching his squad get massacred. I think William Hope's performance in that actually is not only true to the character being in over his head, but it sells the horror of the moment.
Yeah.
But no, you go ahead and say some stuff, Nick, and then I'll work off what you got to say.
All right. So Gorman, yes, at first he does air. At first, he has this sense of confidence to his demeanor and his persona, but that immediately kind of falls apart when we find out that this mission is only his second mission. So then you kind of call into question from then on out a lot of his decisions. And then you notice the way that he moves, it's very amateur. Like literally even Hicks, the man who's quite a few steps under him, has to kind of reel him in and steer him in the right direction, i.e. the face hugger scene, which this kind of stuck out to me last time I watched it. Helps with the subtitles. He has to call out to Gorman twice in order to grab his attention to look at the face hugger room. He goes, "Lieutenant Gorman." Like he says it more sternly, and that's what finally grabs his attention. And then, of course, there's the hive scene, where at first he's like directing the team relatively well. He's trying to keep it very professional. He's trying to keep it smooth and streamlined. And at first he is like kind of drawn into looking around the hive, but then he fails to notice, yeah, these guys are pretty much next to a hydrogen bomb. So if they were to fire their weapons in there, adios muchachos.
Well, and the thing is that he should have mentioned that to them. There was no reason why he couldn't have told Apone, hey, y'all can't fire because y'all are right next to the reactor. But then that wouldn't have made Drake and Vasquez disobey orders and just heighten the tension. Everything that goes wrong is supposed to, so that the movie has that effect.
And the effect is effective.
Mm-hmm.
And then when everything starts going to shit, he tries and fails miserably to take back control of the situation in his favor, and it bites him in the ass.
Mm-hmm.
But then when he gets back up, because he's taken out of the movie for a while because he gets smacked in the head with a piece of equipment, then he wakes back up. I like that it seemed like his ego had been humbled, because he doesn't try to take back control of the mission. He just lets Hudson, or not Hudson, excuse me. See, even I do it. He just lets Hicks remain in control. And
it's the H's.
Yeah. And also they do look kind of similar.
A little bit.
He just lets Hicks keep control of the situation, because I feel like he could tell, all right, you're actually you're not doing a bad job at keeping this together. I'll let you continue. I'm not going to impede you. And he doesn't really have that much else to do for the rest of the movie. He's just another hand to help. He's another person to fire a gun, and he goes out poetically fighting. So
next to somebody who hated his guts.
Yep, he's not a bad character. He's at first an unlikable character, but he does redeem himself in the end. Well, not even like super unlikable. He's just, you kind of pity him. You're just like, oh, geez, dude, why can't you just admit?
His intentions aren't malicious. He just isn't the proper guy for this job. And that also, there's like a fan theory, at least I saw it in a review one time. I'm going to say it's a fan theory. That he was chosen on purpose, probably or Burke was influential in getting him chosen so that the Marines would not be as effective as they needed to be, which would have allowed Burke to, bring back a Xenomorph somehow.
Yep.
So that's my fan theory, is that Gorman is placed there on purpose, or he was chosen on purpose so that things would probably work more in Burke's favor. But yeah.
Next, we have Bishop, played by Lance Henriksen, an android.
Yes.
Not too much to say about him, other than it kind of brings back a bit of a prototypey distrust towards robots that would become very prevalent in Terminator 2. It's very much so downplayed here, but you can see the seeds of the future being planted here. That Ripley is very aggressive towards Bishop because of her bad experience with Ash. But as the movie goes on, she like slowly warms up to him, and in her eyes, he earns her trust, which is why I feel bad for him when he gets torn to pieces.
Yep. He's definitely the counter to Ash in the original movie.
Very much so.
Which in itself is somewhat poetic, at least in the way Cameron takes the story, is the fact that Bishop is there to remind Ripley that, actually, this could be even a lesson for life. Excuse me. This could be a lesson for life, is that just because somebody of a certain nature did something wrong to you doesn't mean that everyone of that
nature is
it
the
could be
same.
a thing for like race or gender, or just because somebody of a certain persuasion or background hurt you doesn't mean that everybody from that background, is
The
just
same.
like the one who hurt you. And also, I didn't even really think of it until now, but you're right. It is predating Terminator, or at least the similar dynamic in Terminator 2, with Sarah and Uncle Bob. So just similar ideas that are very compelling, and just adds to the dramatic weight of the movie.
Something that I noticed this most recent viewing, I don't know if this was intentional, because this could have just been a trick of the light, but throughout the movie, especially like when they're in the compound, everyone's all dirty and sweaty and grubby and looks unshowered. But whenever Bishop's on screen, he's clean. He's not sweaty. He's not dirty. He looks synthetic. He looks plastic. And again, I don't know if that was intentional. Again, it could have just been a coincidence and a trick of the light. But if they were trying to convey that he is a synthetic, they did it well.
Well, there was also something that Henriksen wanted to do. There was actually going to be an effect related to Bishop, is that whenever he got alerted, apparently something would happen to his eyes. I don't have much details aside from what was mentioned here on Wikipedia, but I'm guessing they might have flashed red or something, like whenever he was alerted by something.
Huh.
This is kind of followed up on in Alien 3, whenever Ripley plugs something into him, and he basically reads back the flight recorder, I think it was. And he basically is just relaying that audio like a machine would.
Yep.
I'm guessing it would have been red or something, but Cameron said, well, it would have made him look more frightening than the aliens, so it must have looked pretty freaky. So it also would have been counterintuitive to what
and
the arc of the
a little reminiscent of Terminator, because fun fact, Lance Henriksen was at one point considered to play the Terminator.
Yes, indeed. Which that would have been cool in its own fashion, but it would have definitely made Terminator, I think, more of a cult film, because Lance Henriksen is a very memorable actor, but he also, like Michael Biehn, has kind of a cult appeal.
Mm-hmm.
He's done a lot of stuff that would be very genre heavy, I guess you'd say, and Arnold has that superstar element that is what catapulted Terminator to its success.
Yep.
So, yeah. Things work out for a reason, I think, most of the time.
And then finally, Burke. Little sniveling fucking weasel.
What makes it worse, and this is really my main thought on Burke, is the fact that he kind of tries, or he comes across what he wants you to think that he's your friend. He like kind of has this. It would be nice if it was genuine, but he does kind of like the watching out for Ripley in particular, but in hindsight you realize he's really just buttering her up so that she'll do what he wants.
Yep.
He kind of has this fake charming quality. He tries to charm people by being
kind of like
and,
Kenji Sahara's character in Mothra vs. Godzilla.
Yeah, it's like a put on not politeness, but
facade.
A put on friendliness. It's a put on friendliness where if you're an astute and observant person, or maybe not even in that case, you can actually tell that, oh, this guy, there's something off about this guy.
It's a facade.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, keep going, Nick, and I'll just give thoughts on what you think.
Other than that, yeah, he's just a sniveling little weasel. But you know what's weird? I actually did not see this coming when I first saw this movie, so I will say I do think it is a bit of a good twist, because the whole time you're brought up to think, oh, this guy is like he's a part of the company, but he's seeing firsthand what kind of damage these creatures can do. So you're going to think like, oh, well, maybe he's just going to go against the company. But then, nope, he actually is a company man and he wants to get money out of these monsters. And you're just like, oh, you sniveling little bastard.
Yeah, you think he's going to make amends for how the company wronged Ripley and the crew of the Nostromo in the original movie, but then you realize, oh, he's actually probably one of these guys who's been, well, he wouldn't have been around whenever the first directive was applied, which was 57 years earlier.
Yep.
But he's basically in that same vein of people who are, that's what their motivation is.
Yep. Not much to say other than he's a sniveling little weasel and he gets it good in the end.
He does, indeed.
So with all that being fucking said, like 40 freaking minutes talking about the characters, let's move on to the rest of the pros.
Yeah, well, we won't, we'll just say our brief piece about them, I guess, unless you just want to.
We'll gush.
Right, so my second one is the suspense, which I think is,
as mine is too.
Yeah, which is pretty much on par, if not a little bit better, because the pacing matches it.
Yes.
In this movie, it draws you in, just like, well, Cameron even makes a. In terms of the pacing thing that I said, Cameron even makes a reference to the opening of the original Alien whenever the Sulaco ship is waking up. So he's paying his tribute to his predecessor. And again, but like we've said before, he just elaborates on the concept further. But the suspense here...
it's very palpable.
It's very palpable, very good. It draws you in. There are still some good jump scares in here. You go ahead and I'll just I'll work
to quote James Cameron, or not James Cameron, even though their names are James, to quote James Rolfe, the first act of this movie matches the first film in terms of suspense and drawing you in and getting its hooks in you, but not like Jaws. Gone is the Jaws elements in this movie, in my opinion. Not to say that Alien is a ripoff of Jaws, but as we discussed yesterday, the film's plot is very similar to Jaws.
They're from the same time, and they're working off that similar element that was in the genre at the time.
Yes. Here, we're in the 80s. The suspense here is a bit more like a conventional slasher or horror film, but it's fucking good. It draws you in, it gets its hooks in you, and it gets you on the edge of your seat. And a lot of it has to do with its excellent use of environmental storytelling, a bit like The Thing. One of my favorite scenes in the entire movie is when they first get into the colony. They open up the doors and they see a fucked up, war-torn colony. Not a line of dialogue is spoken. Well, very little, very, very little dialogue is spoken. And all we see is just the war-torn area. It looks like some shit went down. There's no music and there's barely any sound effects. It's that quietness that draws you in and you're just like, damn, shit went down here.
Exactly, and I'll just go ahead and bump it up because it was lower on my list. My next pro would be the atmosphere, which, again, the suspense and atmosphere work in tandem with each other. Is it also on your pros too, Nick?
No, but I feel like that could just be wrapped up into the...
Yeah, okay, so I'll go ahead and talk about it. Like what you were saying, and The Thing definitely has this too. Just this whole feeling of something really bad happened here previously, and it's all just a matter of set design and like how the music and the pacing and the direction all factors into each other to create that feeling.
Yep.
It also helps that it's raining.
Yep.
Not quite as hostile as the environment was in Alien, but there's a reason for that because it's been terraformed. But still, even then, I don't think there's ever really much of of sunlight on LV-426. I
Nope.
think it's probably a very gloomy place to live.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just even before they land, whenever the ship's flying around and surveying what it can, it's just all really great atmosphere. What you see just on the cameras and stuff like that, and like
Which
entering the net.
I didn't list this as a pro, but I do want to talk about this: the use of camera footage. Not like a found footage movie, but I wouldn't be surprised if this movie was at least a little bit of a footstep in the found footage genre, because often it's mostly in the first act. Actually, no, it's all in the first act. When they're surveying the colony, and especially the hive, there's a lot of POV shots from head cams. And that, too, puts yourself in the footsteps of the Marines in a good way. Makes you feel like you're really there. And that's another way the movie draws you in and hooks you and progresses the story, I guess, for lack of a better term. And it just makes the suspense and the tension that much better.
I agree. And yeah, that's also one reason why this matches, and then in some cases surpasses what the first movie does, because it feels like it's in the same vein, but then much more so.
Yep.
Just like the time of the movie escalates the threat with there being more than one alien, so does all the feelings and the aspects that come with it are expanded upon as well.
Yep.
So, and this is, again, I think there's one of them that I bumped down because it's all going to roll into these technical things, but I bumped this one up. So I guess my pro number 4 is this has sequelitis, but in a good way.
I'll just say this film has a great expansion of the Xenomorphs.
Well, the main... Go ahead.
But yes, this does have a bit of sequelitis, but again, in a good way. But kind of like with, what was that recent movie we were talking about? I guess Predator 2. It takes the elements from the previous movie that are familiar, and it brings it into the next film. And it has them so that they are familiar, but it builds upon them and shows us more of them and expands on them, and doesn't just do a shot-for-shot copy / repeat of the first film.
Yeah, true. And the main reason I put it down is because my takeaway is that what you want a sequel to do is to remind you of something you loved or are familiar with from the first movie. And there's plenty of times where this happens here, whether it's the chest burster nightmare, where you immediately remember, oh, that's what happened to Kane.
Yep.
And it's also a bit disorienting, because you're like, wait a minute, why does Ripley have a chest burster? And then it's like, oh, it's a nightmare. Or like whenever they come across the face huggers, and like Hicks is inspecting one with his, they're dead, but he's like inspecting one with his shotgun. He lifts it up and then tosses it away in disgust.
Oh,
or
them.
Or even when they see them in the canisters, and that jump scare where Bert gets too close, and it's like, oh crap, there it goes, but then it's contained, so you're okay. Or even the chest burster from the one woman in the hive scene, or a great moment where Hicks says, "It looks like somebody bagged one of Ripley's bad guys here," and you see the hole in the floor from the acid blood.
Yep.
Which goes back to the face hugger just dripping a little bit in the first movie and how bad that was.
Yep.
So yeah, that's what I'm trying to convey when I say sequelitis, is that you see things you liked about a predecessor and you remember them fondly, or it gets you excited because you're like, oh, I know what's going on here. I want to see how the characters react to it. So yeah, that's my impressions on sequelitis. What was that?
There's one element to the Xenomorphs that I'm going to save for later. I'm hoping that Trev gets what that is.
I think I do.
But the great expansion of the Xenomorphs here, one, we see a different design showing that, kind of like with snakes, as we were discussing in our Predator 2 review, they're the same species, but there's different variants. What we saw in the first movie, I think, is known as a lurker.
Yeah, a drone or a worker.
Here, these are what are known as warrior drones. They have the more ridged and ornate head design, and rather than the smooth design, which I feel like everyone just loved the smooth design from the first movie, because we wouldn't see the ridged warrior design until AVPR, which is kind of a shame, because I think that makes them look more menacing and threatening.
Cameron said it also contributes to their camouflage.
That too, yeah. They look a lot more badass here, because it looks like they're a bit more bulky and a bit more muscular. Whereas the big chap, he was very slim and slender. Here, the warrior drones look a lot more bulky and more masculine and powerful, for lack of a better term.
Well, which makes sense because, well, even though she surpasses them but she is the only feminine or female member of the group. The other ones, I guess they emphasize the maleness to distinguish, even though they are the smaller ones of the group of the species. But anyway,
true.
The sounds they make is a nice addition. Was that?
Oh yeah, more sound effects like that. The peacock screech, I guess, is what it's called.
The peacock baby elephant, which they made a noise at the same time when they were recording that at a zoo, and that's that effect is the sound of them together, is that unsettling death noise.
Yeah, whenever they get shot, they let out this screechy sound. And there's a lot more hissing sound effects, and more. There's a lot more slime, a lot more mucus added to them to make them look nasty and more badass. You also see how exactly they breed and they spread. They're kind of like ants or bees, as stated in the film. They make a hive, they trap people, they impregnate them, and that's how they reproduce.
Exactly.
It's just this great expansion of the xenomorph life cycle. And also, once again, bringing back elements from the first movie, we see the iconic opening of the egg shots. See more of them here. And
exactly.
Yeah, the xenomorph expansion in this movie is just stellar. Let's see.
Go ahead.
I just ran out of I lost track of where I was at. I think that was pro number 3 for me, is the expansion of the xenomorphs.
Yeah, which that plays into the good thing about having a sequel effect. So I know why you brought it up. So you want me to move on?
Yeah, go right ahead.
My next pro would be the action. I don't usually call this out. I know that Nick does usually, so he makes up for it. But yeah, I just have to talk about the fact that this is probably one of the best action films ever made.
Funny enough, that's one of my pros too, so we'll talk about it together. Yeah, pro number 4 is the action scenes are fucking stellar.
Well, and a critic also put it, I forgot who it was, but it's on Wikipedia. They said that Cameron basically reinvented the war movie, and that he blends that war movie aesthetic with, which this is pretty much all they had to compare it to at the time, with Star Wars, is what they were saying.
Yep.
Which I can kind of see that. In terms of like the space element. Alien is definitely derived from Star Wars in that way to a small extent. So yeah, I guess that would be a way to spin off in that direction, say this is a war movie but with a Star Wars sci-fi aesthetic to it. And I think Cameron definitely he nails it. There's talk about, he had some Vietnam influence in there, mainly for the fact that it's soldiers who underestimate their enemy.
Yep.
And then are subsequently overpowered.
Yep.
but yeah, it's just thrilling. There's cool things that make for great action set pieces, like the APC, the power loader facing off with the Queen.
Yep.
All those things, the weapons. Part of the reason why this is such a good double bill with Predator is that they blend those war action genre with monster movies. Probably the best of the best. I mean, there's probably some other examples, but those two are definitely at the top of the list when it comes to blending the genres as well as they do.
And thankfully, they don't clash. The action elements and the horror elements do not clash with each other. They mix together like bread and butter. It's fantastic. But yeah, the action scenes are utterly spectacular, and thankfully, it rewards you for being patient by having a lot of action in the last 2/3 of the film. You have the build up and the setup of the first act, but then once shit hits the fan in the alien hive, there's a lot of consistent action scenes throughout the rest of the movie. There's the hive shootout. There's the robot sentry scene. There's the breaching of the colony. There's the infiltration of the Queen's Den and the escape of LV-426. And then finally, there's the secondary climactic fight with the Queen on board the Sulaco. There's lots of action. It's very well done, very entertaining, well choreographed, well edited, despite the red lights and strobing lights. It's entertaining as fuck.
To say the least. So yeah, moving right along, because I'm sure this is on your list as well. The effects are most definitely a pro here. We aren't limited to
one monster.
Carlos. Yeah, we're not. Yeah, I think the same guy who did the unfortunately not that great mechanical effects for King Kong, as well as some other Dino De Laurentiis.
Carlo Rambaldi.
Yeah, so like Silver Bullet, the little troll in Cat's Eye, stuff like that. He was involved with some of the animatronics for the first Alien. Here we have the great Stan Winston, I do believe fresh off of the Terminator, which he obviously made a great impression there. Here, though, is his, and I lumped her, I don't know if she's a separate pro for you or not, but I lumped her under the effects because I think she is one of the best effects put to the screen is the Xenomorph Queen, a combination of animatronic and miniatures also.
And puppetry.
Puppetry, yes. I think she's completely believable in her face-off with the power loader as a living creature. There might be a few shots, like maybe like when she's breaking off of the ovipositor and the there's a few shots here and there where she looks like a puppet, but it still has that practical charm to it.
Mm-hmm.
The rear the Xenomorphs, they are kind of filmed in a similar way to the one from the original movie, but since
you don't really see a full body shot of them. Like they use them very sparingly, but not in a way that's cheap, but in a way that makes them scary.
Also, it also communicates that, true to the title, there's a lot of them.
Yep.
Even if there was only 6 suits that were made, they still used them very well. It's almost kind of like Troopers 2, where they had a handful of Shrieker puppets.
And only one graboid prop.
Yeah, but they still, made it come across like it was more than one. But also, there's great miniatures here. The drop ship, the APC itself, just the set design involving those miniatures, like of the compound and the colony surrounding. It's just very peak practical work here that makes you appreciate the art. It's kind of like in other stuff that we like, such as tokusatsu stuff, but with that American finesse, I guess you'd say. There's matte paintings. There's all kinds of things. The Sulaco, you're not wondering why it looks like a city because it's just the right size.
No, instead of looking like a giant city, it looks like a giant gun that got broken in half.
Yeah, but it also makes sense because, well, I mean, that aesthetic makes sense for like a military ship.
True.
And then, it just makes sense. So, yeah, the effects in this movie, great eye candy. They're executed well. They have that charm, even if they're maybe not as slick, I guess, as some digital effects are now. They still are very well executed. And, yeah, my main thing is that they're charming and most of the time convincing. Yeah, so an undoubted pro. Do you have anything to say?
Well, I will say one. Is this pro number 4 for me? I keep losing fucking track. Yeah.
Read them off real quick.
No, 4 was action scenes. 5, yeah, is the amazing special effects. The effects here are absolutely top notch. Some of Stan Winston's best stuff ever on screen. The alien suits are flawless. Now, again, they're shot in a way that you don't see the full body, but I don't get the sense that they did that because they wanted to hide them. Well, at least not in the way you might think. They wanted to hide them in a way that made them still scary. Not to hide any flaws in the effects, but the suits look amazing. They're very slimy and wet and nasty, and every time you see one, it just looks like they're dripping with goo. And they move very well. They move humanoid, but also kind of like bugs, which is good.
They're basically space ants.
True, yeah. This will tie into the production design, which is pro number 6. Stellar. The production design is so good. I totally buy this colony as being a real space colony. It looks lived in. It looks genuine. It looks old. It looks real. Same goes for the alien hive. I totally buy it. It's a good mix of real human technology and also this alien world that's literally just spreading all throughout the compound. And it's nasty. It's slimy. It's dripping with goo. It looks like a very unpleasant, nasty place to be in.
Also, sorry, real quick, Stan Winston's stamp on the Alien franchise is also undeniably the Queen.
Well, I will talk about the Queen in a little bit.
Yeah, I got you. Anyway.
The explosions look really solid. All the matte paintings and the composite shots the composite shots, I'll admit, are slightly dated, but that's just because of the Blu-ray transfer. It does make them stick out a little bit, but again, they don't linger on them too much. So yeah, the composite shots look good. The miniatures are very well done. Again, the suits look great. Overall, the special effects in this... Oh, and the weapons are also... They look really good, too. They look totally plausible and look like real weapons. Yeah, the effects in this movie are top-notch. 10 out of 10, perfect.
Undeniably. All right, so moving right along, my next one is the music. I have some qualms with James Horner in terms of where he repeats stuff in later or earlier movies.
But here, me, James Horner gives us some good music. So pro number 7 for me is the music. It is awesome. Equally and surpassing the original for iconic music. When I think of alien music, it's the music from this movie that comes to mind.
Yeah, whether it's the droning opening title sequence as it forms, which is also like the original movie.
Yep.
It's again a nice marketing back. Even the nice soft, quiet theme, which I guess is maybe Ripley and Newt's theme.
Yep.
Which plays over the opening credits, is nice and relaxing, honestly, and very serene. Or even like there's that kind of branching off of Goldsmith's kind of mysterious and wondrous theme, like the theme that plays when we have the long shot of the colony that's floating up above Earth, where Ripley's at for a little bit whenever she's first found. That little bit of music, that music is kind of ominous but also wondrous at the same time. It also plays, I think, whenever Newt's parents are driving up to the Juggernaut. Again, just a nice. It's creepy, but also, again, that sense of wonder is there. The unsettling, the main thing that I think of whenever I hear the music, like whenever they're walking into the hive, or
very creepy.
It's this sinking. It's dreadful. It's this sinking, like, oh, they're in deep shit now. They just don't realize it. But they're slowly, like, the horror of what they're witnessing is washing over them. Or even the little bit of music whenever everybody's getting killed, whenever they're overwhelmed and Gorman's watching from the monitors. Again, that just, it's also, I think, the music that plays whenever during the nightmare for the chest burster. Again, just that sinking, tense, unsettling music where something's about to happen or is happening that's out of your control. That's the feeling that it brings across. Horner also reuses some pieces of music from the end of the original Alien, mainly in the third act whenever they're trying to escape from the Queen.
Like the one that sticks out to me is the same one that plays when Big Chap pops up in Ripley's way in the shuttle. That's replayed when the Queen shows herself in front of the elevator after she rips off from her ovipositor. That's the one that really sticks out to me. But overall, James Horner's music for this movie is utterly spectacular. It's very varied, and it perfectly fits any scene where it's noteworthy. The opening scene is ominous and is like a welcome back to hell type thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The military theme with the military drums that's playing, it's a bit cheesy because it just sounds like generic military music, but it's also like really good suit up music. Like everyone's gearing up for battle and they're heading in very confident and egos inflated, but it gets you excited and it gets you pumped up like, oh yeah, some shit's about to go down.
Well, exactly like you said, it's you notice you only hear that theme before they realize, oh shit, we're in it deep. It's supposed to accompany their bravado and their ego, pretty much is the way I look at it, and then it just completely disappears once after the hive scene.
Yep, the music that plays during the hive scene, it's like a good crescendo of a big reveal, or like a big look at this, look in awe type scene.
Yeah, there's awe, but it's also
doomy
because what you're seeing, it's horrifying, but also like, wow, so this is what's really going on here, is the way it feels.
But my favorite piece of music, I think it's called Feudal Escape. It plays during the hive scene, but my favorite use of it is when Vasquez is trying to hold off the aliens, when Hicks is trying to burn his way through the locked door. It's just so awesome, and it lends itself so well into making the scene so exhilarating and getting your blood pumping. And you're just like, fuck yes, this is awesome. And of course, the music that plays for both of this movie's climaxes is just awesome. It builds to an excellent crescendo. It gets your blood flowing, and you're just sitting back totally exhilarated. Like, fuck, this is good.
And also very heavily referenced. I forgot to mention it for that review, but it's also very heavily referenced. Well, this score is in general in Requiem. In that movie, whenever the helicopter is trying to escape from the town as the Newt goes off, that also has a similar, or it's harkening back to that crescendo of we just made it out in time kind of feel.
True, yeah.
All right, so yeah, we pretty much just jerked off the music there. Moving right along, really we kind of delved into several aspects of this, talking about the cast for like 30 minutes, it felt like, which was well deserved though. The story for me is another pro, and it's funny that I ended up listing this so far down, but again, I'm not going to linger on it too much because the cast illustrates why the story is good. But again, it's just what you want to see out of a sequel to something, and it just executes it perfectly.
Yep.
And finally, I realized I misnumbered my pros, so this is listed as 8, but it's really 9. My last pro is the legacy of this movie is probably, I would say, hands down, probably the most influential. I mean, Alien is right there with it in terms of its influence on later films and filmmakers. But I think Aliens is the movie that made the undeniable pop culture stamp, where it was a hit. Sigourney Weaver got nominated for a Best Actress Oscar for this movie, which this rarely happens with this kind of flick.
Sadly.
A lot of technical aspects were nominated and probably won some accolades. Without this movie, we probably wouldn't have a Alien versus Predator. We may not even have had Predator, although I think Predator was working more off of the fact that it was supposed to be Rambo meets Alien. So
true.
Even if Aliens hadn't existed, I think Predator probably would have came about in some form. But just the synergy the two movies have, I think, played a major influence on Alien versus Predator as a comic series, and then, eventually video games, and then especially the video games, because, the Marines pop up in the comics, but they also are present for the video games. They're even a faction, I think. They are factions in numerous, installments in that series.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, its legacy is undeniable. Some people confuse this with the first Alien. Like you ask somebody, "Have you seen Alien?" And they're like, "Is that the one with the little girl?" And then you're like, so you realize that the impact of this movie kind of eclipsed the first to an extent. I mean, not super duper that much, but they cover a lot of the same ground. But one is more, I guess, pop culturally significant, so
friendly.
They kind of in tandem with each other, but also one is probably remembered a little bit more than the other. It's just a major legacy. There's a reason why this is probably still the highest rated Alien movie, Alien or Predator movie, but Predator is right behind it, turns out. Its legacy is there, and I don't think it's going to go anywhere anytime soon.
Nope, and it's still felt to this day, because not only did it get an unofficial ripoff / remake in the form of Carnosaur 2 in 1995, I believe, but it also got a ripoff / remake in 2019 with Doom Annihilation.
Mm-hmm. Among many others, just like the original Alien had a lot of ripoffs.
Yeah. And one of which James Cameron worked on, Galaxy of Terror.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And then there's even one that's in the Roger Corman family, I'll point out. I think it's called Deep Space, and it has no relation to the video games, but it's very much influenced by aliens. And it's kind of the Forbidden World or Galaxy of Terror equivalent to Aliens. So, yeah, Roger Corman was definitely trying to capitalize on these two movies throughout the 80s.
Pro number 8 for me is the pacing overall in this movie. You ain't going to find no slow bits, at least none that are an issue. Every scene feels important. Every scene feels integral to the story. And every scene flows into each other with natural progression. It all just feels absolutely essential in the context of the story. Nothing feels unnecessary. Nothing drags. Nothing goes by too quick. This movie is very, very cinematically paced, in my opinion, and it's absolutely pitch perfect. nary a scene it goes by where I'm not at least intrigued.
It's like a roller coaster where it has its highs and then the lows are still going, but it gives you a chance to relax and then it picks back up again.
Pro number 9 is the scares. Good jump scares, and good callbacks to the first film. Like the chest burster scene in this movie, I would say is equally as horrific than Kane's in the original. Partially because it's a girl. It's kind of fucked up to see that happen to her. I'd say it's a bit gorier too. Like the blood sticks out a lot more, in my opinion, because everything just looks so doomy and gloomy. And then you see a whole shit ton of blood. You're just like, oh fuck.
Yeah, but it's never over the top. It's like we said before. Later movies like Requiem and Covenant definitely go overboard with the gore.
But here, when there is gore, it's very visceral and it gets your attention, and it like its purpose hits home right then and there. Not much to say about the scares, but yeah, they're very, very effective. Pro number 10 is the hive scenes. All the hive scenes in this movie, I honestly think these are my favorites in the whole movie. Because, I mean, it could be a movie in and of itself. The first one is such a great exploration / butt fucking scene, for the lack of a better term. Like, the whole time, it's kind of like the opening scene to the original Mummy from 1932. And I'm only saying this because the whole time just getting flashbacks to James Rolfe's sequel-a-thon 2. You're watching these guys go into the hive, and you just know that they're in deep shit, and you're just waiting for the shit to hit the fan. And when shit does hit the fan, it's very effective and very entertaining. And it's oddly kind of cathartic to see these guys just totally get their asses kicked. And it's just like, yeah, you low-key deserve that for not taking this very seriously. But overall, go ahead. What?
Oh, I would agree completely. You actually worded it. You put the words right out of my mouth.
And the second hive scene, when Ripley goes into the Queen's lair, all I'll say for right now, it's good. Pro number 11 is the ending. It's just, I think this is the only movie that I can think of off the top of my head that has a double climax, being the escape of LV-426 and flushing of the Queen out into space. The only other one I can kind of think of, and ironically, this is also a Fox movie, but this is not even in the same vein. It just kind of does come to mind, is the ending to the original Planet of the Apes, where that has a double twist ending, where not only do you realize he was on Earth the whole time, but this is also in the future.
Well, you could say that's also there for the original Alien. You think that she gets away as it explodes.
True,
then,
yeah.
Yeah, they're on the ship.
Okay, fair enough. But this takes that element and bumps it up to 11.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Not much to say without talking about pro number 12. The Queen Alien is awesome. This bitch is one of my favorite giant monsters of all time. And I do consider the Queen Alien to be a giant monster. A small giant monster, but still a giant monster as far as I'm concerned. The effects are absolutely breathtaking on this thing. Sure, there are a couple scenes where she looks like a miniature or she looks like a puppet, but the animatronics, especially in the close-ups, are absolutely phenomenal. despite the fact she has no eyes, I get the sense that she actually does have eyes and she has facial expressions. A lot of it has to do with her lips. Like, after she tears Bishop apart, she kind of looks over at Newt, but then she looks down at Ripley and like her lips she gives her like a really nasty snarling sneer, and you get the sense that Mama's pissed.
Well, both mamas are. That's pretty much what that final scene is the war of the mamas, pretty much. Also, I'll point out, I do agree with you. In fact, we could, even though you can't see their eyes, it's assumed that maybe they see through their dome, the top of their head, because there's 2 later movies where we actually see Xenomorph vision, and it's pretty much, they actually see pretty clear. It's slightly askewed, but it's not like Predator where they only see heat or something like that. They actually see things pretty well. You just don't know where their eyes are. It makes it to where you can't relate to them if you don't see their eyes,
which I'm sure was done intentionally.
Yeah, they're more foreign and more unsettling if there's no eyes for a connection point. But anyway, you're saying
the animatronic close-ups on the Queen alien are absolutely convincing. I totally buy this as being a real living creature. The slime and all the drool and the wetness conveys that effectively as well too. Yeah, the Queen alien is a badass bitch and is a very, very, she feels like the best kind of final boss. And I like how she's foreshadowed. Each one of these things comes from an egg, right? So who's laying these eggs? That's a great question. It must be something we haven't seen yet. And then that kind of makes you wonder, are we going to see that? But then you forget about it because the movie around it is so good. And then her reveal. Second hive scene. One thing that I love about this, when Ripley saves Newt, gets her out of the cocoon, starts trying to escape, and then comes across her lair. No music, no sound. Well, there's a little bit of sound, like there's some steam vents going off, but it's very quiet and it's very still. And then you look over and then you see something laying an egg. And it's such a slow, creepy reveal. She looks like a termite queen, which I'm sure that was intentional. You see this giant egg-laying tube, and then you see this hulking giant xenomorph frame and with the giant crown, and you're just like, holy shit.
She's basically the T-1000 in this movie, in the way that the T-1000 is basically an improvement on the T-800 as its predecessor. This is like the biggest, baddest xenomorph there is.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean that's it in a nutshell. But go on.
That's pretty much it. She's just a fucking awesome, spectacular monster. The effects on her are absolutely stellar. No flaws, at least none that if you want to nitpick her to death, go right ahead. But there's no flaws in the effects. And I do get the sense that she's not just a mindless monster. She's got some sentience to her. Like when she tells it doesn't tell the drones, but she makes the drones stand down. And just with her body language and her facial expressions, kind of say that loosely because she's pretty much a space ant. There's only so much facial expressions that she has. But still,
no, I see what you're saying. Like whenever she, again, an example of sentience. Whenever she sees the elevator, she knows that's how she's going to get up top.
Like with that head nod that she has.
Or even like when she sees Newt, she's probably thinking, "Okay, you took away my babies, so I'm going to take away yours." That's basically what is conveyed. So you could say that the animatronic and the puppets, they do act. They do convey that kind kind of feeling, and especially like when she sees Newt under the grating and whatnot. She's determined to get her, and it comes across like, okay, yeah, this is my revenge. I'm going to take away Newt.
Yep. Stellar. Absolutely phenomenal monster. And just overall, this is a phenomenal movie. I'm just going to say, yeah, I have no cons. I have nothing bad to say about this movie whatsoever. It is a masterpiece of cinema.
Anything bad we have to say is only little nitpicks, and those are things that, again, Nick, you actually put it very well. The hive scene is that cathartic moment where any character who was bugging us, they either get theirs or that's their motivation for realizing the error of their ways.
Yep. Fuck, just makes me want to watch the movie all over again.
I'm probably going to watch it a couple more times before we do our next reviews in tandem with its follow-up, but more on that later. Yeah. So my final thoughts?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, like Nick said, this is a masterpiece of the genre, but even then, that's high praise, but it's also just overall one of the best movies ever made. Certainly one of Cameron's top three or five. I can't remember how many movies exactly he's made. Not many, so but it's definitely in the top tier for sure. I think if you want a movie that encapsulates 80s, well, from the end of the 70s all the way up through the early 90s for like a similar feel, these are the movies that I would recommend you watch.
I will say, too, despite the fact that this movie was made in 1986, it's not very dated. Really, the only way that I think this film is dated is Amanda Ripley's age, which is relatively kind of young, and especially at that time, comparing it to now.
Yeah.
And especially that being in the future, but just at the time you realize that 66 was on the lower tier of old age, whereas now it's at the highest tier of middle age.
Yes, exactly.
And one that stuck out to me is the fact that the Nostromo only costs $32 million. You'd think a ship of that size would cost more like $32 billion. But in 1986, $32 million was a lot of money.
Exactly, yeah.
But aside from that, the film is very, very timeless, in my opinion.
Yeah, but if you want like the pinnacle of movies of this type, I agree with Nick that that it is timeless. But if you want like the perfect grouping of movies from this time period that are of this genre, you have the first Alien, you have John Carpenter's The Thing, you have this, you have Predator, and some people
Terminator.
look at me for saying this, but I would also add Predator 2 and Alien 3. And those are 6 movies right there that I think encapsulate a period of cinema that we really seem to have lost. Not to lament it too much, but it is very much a period of cinema history that I think we keep on trying to return to, at least in terms of this particular genre, but we just haven't quite been able to recapture it. But I think those 6 movies are like the perfect grouping of the pinnacle of the genre at the time for sci-fi horror movies.
And if you want, you could even throw in the first Terminator, the first RoboCop, and Terminator 2 there as well.
And I would even go as far as putting RoboCop 2 in there, because
there you go.
That movie. Those are pretty much the 4, 5 if we include The Thing. Those are pretty much the 5 sci-fi monster robot horror icons of that time, and those entries that we mentioned are like their peak, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
And on that note, I will give this movie a undoubted 10 out of 10. Only minor nitpicks to point out if you're so inclined, but other than that, this is this is a treat, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the best way to put it.
My final thoughts on Aliens: it is a masterpiece of cinema. It's one of the greatest sequels ever made. This movie laid the groundwork for so many movies to rip it off, homage it, continue it, attempting to with Aliens Colonial Marines. There's so much that's laying here that sci-fi horror tries to exploit along with the original Alien, that you feel its presence in movies made to this day. Sometimes it's an issue, like in Alien, or in totally like in Doom Annihilation, or sometimes it's an added fun effect, like in Doom 2005, which very much feels like Aliens, but just with demons, but in a good way. This is one of my favorite sequels. This is one of my favorite horror movies, one of my favorite sci-fi films, and just in general, one of my favorite movies of all time. And I'll be giving it an unabashed, undoubted 10 out of motherfucking 10. Perfect solid gold, 10 out of 10. This is definitely a Nick's special, but I don't care. It's just such a great movie. And as Trev says, it's a treat.
It is.
So with all that being said, after 2 hours and 31 minutes of reviewing, which I'm sure is going to annoy the shit out of some people. Oh, I needed this. Push the comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. Trev, anything to plug?
I sent off my audio for my contributions to Daikaiju Spacezilla's review of Godzilla and Godzilla King of the Monsters 1956. So yeah, that will be at his discretion to upload, but I have sent off my work and it will eventually be put out there. But yeah, that's the main thing to look forward to in terms of my other internet activity for now. The Fictosphere.com is out there. If y'all are so inclined to look at my writings, I actually haven't wrote anything Alien or Predator related yet, but I have considered it. And I do have a YouTube channel out there. I'm not going to commit to anything because I haven't delivered on some things that I said I was going to do in previous videos here, so I'm not going to get anybody's hopes up. But my YouTube channel is out there. If you type in Trevor of Fictosphere in the search, you will find other videos that I've done with people, as well as, for some reason, this is the only one that pops up, but my very first video where I went over my mainly Godzilla collection, or at least part of it, that will be the video where you're able to find my channel.
And so, yeah, Texas ASMR.
Indeed. So yeah, just if you like what I said here or any of Nick's reviews, just go and look for me.
And as always, remember, aliens. This time, it's war. And I will see you guys in the next video.